it appears to be such an intensive process, how does one scale this up? There are thousands of perpetrators all around. How do we scale this up?
What a big question, the last one. If you have an answer, then it would be great. No, this is small work. My work is working in usual one-to-one counseling, and on the other side we make a training program with there are maybe 4 or 5, 6 people in these groups, and it's not possible to make something for everybody. I'm not on this side to find a solution for everybody. I know it's not possible. But you ask about this training, how long it works. In Albania we do it now like that. It's not a fixed training program. They have the topics of this, they know this content of the training programs, but they like to go through this process with this man, especially with these topics of look what they need for their own change. We don't want to follow through a fixed program. Do you understand that? Maybe this is also my experience in my country, in Switzerland. With a few of them I work half a year, with other ones I work 3 months, with other one I work more than 1 year.
I think there's another one who's asking at the back end, and if we will take that. And that will be the last question.
Yeah, Roland, you also talked about, on one of the slides, about doing preventative work with institutions and organisations. Can you talk a bit more about what that involves?
About the organisation we work together?
The preventative work. Preventing violence.
Prevention.
Yeah. I belong to another organisation, Integrated, so we also do a prevention work. And there's also this project in Western Balkan. They also think about make prevention work, and we also go a topic with them about what should be important to be in there. But at the moment, my work as a counsellor is not make prevention work. But we should talk about what is prevention and what not. My thinking is when I make counseling with perpetrators, it's also part of prevention work. It's a special prevention work. Okay.
So, see, each one of our accomplished speakers today gets in psychology firsthand. And they not only take us through the male violence, they take us through the male violence in the public space, in the private space, and different forms of violence. And each one is a very individual journey. So I'm going to call on our next speaker, who is Morris Rekel. Am I getting her name right? Okay, wonderful. He's the Executive Director of Alternative to Vold. Alternative to Violence in Norway. Rekel is specialist in clinical psychology with his degree from University of Oslo. He has 25 years of experience of treating men battling their partners. He also works as a lecturer and a speaker both nationally and internationally. He has published articles and book chapters in Sweden, Italy, England, and USA, and edited textbooks on men violence against women. He has worked as a researcher and has been a member of government committees on men equality and violence. Here is his paper.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to engage in this presentation and this workshop. I'll try to be brief to make space for the discussion and debate afterwards. As Monica said, I'm coming from an organization in Norway called Alternative to Violence, ATV in brief and in everyday language. ATV was the first European program for men being abusive in intimate relationships, starting in 1987. Professional intervention program, and at the start it was really born by the women's movement. Alternative to Violence's work is within the field of domestic violence, men's violence against women, men's violence against women and children. And right from the start, where the analysis around cultural components and causes of violence were strong. Even from the start, we were quite clear in our organization that you have to recognize both culture and tradition and psychology. There is some structural elements to this, but it's surely also individual, personal elements to this, and we have to be able to look at both dimensions at the same time. So our work has been leaning on an understanding of the gendered power structures of society, referring to patriarchy, referring to culture, tradition, social structures, but also it's very much leaning on the actual stories of battered women, battering men and children exposed to domestic violence and family violence. They should be and continue to be an extremely important source of information and understanding. We need them to correct and to adjust our theoretical models and our scientific analysis. My heading is that a child perspective is important in work with men who use violence. I'm not for the setting using the phrase perpetrators. Of course, we are talking about perpetrators, but that's just one side and one aspect of the case. So I choose to use a more neutral phrase. And the child perspective in our work with mostly men really developed when we started to actually see the adult victims, mostly women and the children and youth, for client meetings and for treatment meetings. That was shaping up the necessity and also structuring up why it's so important to implement and integrate a child perspective in the work with the adults. This is the basic general features of the treatment model Alternative to Violence has been developing and still is working on since the start. It's concentrated around 4 themes. It's concentrated around the importance of focusing the violence itself. If we are going to change violence and change the violent behavior of men, mostly, we need to address the violence explicitly, because that's the framework of the actual reality of violence. So the aim of this part of the work is actually to recognize the violence as harmful it is, how big it is, how severe it is, how real it is. You know what I mean. The next focus is not only recognizing the violence, but also working specifically and targeted around that the violence is actually my behavior, it's my problem, it's my responsibility, and it's my responsibility to do something about it. And on this basis of recognizing the violence and my responsibility for it, we start out an exploratory work on referring to the third theme. What is this violence about? Where does it come from? How has it developed in my life? What functions do it serve? And in what ways have I become dependent on violence as an element of my relations and my intimate relations in specific? And of course, an overall focus framing this work is the focus on the consequences of violence. Of course, primarily to the children and to the adult victim, but also the consequences of the violence for the perpetrator himself. This is extremely briefly presenting to you the 4 basic themes that in our opinion, has to be dealt with and has to be worked on in order to make sustainable changes. As my title says, I'm also going to tell you a little bit about our recent developments, which is divided into two areas. Clinically based development work, developing our methodologies and developing new methodologies, and also a few words around the research that is in place around our work. First of all, I want to highlight Vincent Felity's ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, which is a big and worldly known study indicating that being exposed to violence at home as a child is one of the basic backgrounds and reasons for why people develop social, medical and psychological problems in their adult life overall. You need to look into the ACE study if you don't know it. In Alternatives to Violence, we have two big research projects going on at the moment. One of them is looking into the mentalization and reflective capacities of our male clients. And it is revealing, not surprisingly, that these guys have problems with really taking in the phenomenology and the psychology of their children. We can go more into that later. The second big research study is so far bringing data and results on three different aspects. One part of the study was looking into the relation between exposure to violence in childhood and type of violence pattern in adulthood. And the main finding was that the clients, the sample that has been exposed to violence as children the pattern of their adult violent problem was more into regime controlling kind of violence, not as coincidental, not as situational, that kind of qualitative difference. Also, this study reveals that above 60% of these clients in this sample has been exposed to violence in their upbringing families. The second part of this study was looking into to which degree it was possible to say that these clients also have psychological problems in diagnostic terms. Out of the total of the 179 men participating in the study, 70.9% of the men fulfilled the diagnostic criteria for at least one ongoing psychiatric disorder. This is not arguing that these men are sick, but this is an argument that these men are psychologically struggling quite a lot. The third part of the study was about the dropout from treatment. Almost 24% within the first 3 sessions dropped out of the treatment. Our experience is that the first 3 sessions is a critical phase. After the first 3 sessions, the dropout is very low. The second track of the recent developments is based in clinical work and looking into specific aspects and themes around what the men and the clients are struggling with. Trauma is a significant factor in this. both in terms of the traumatic experience of being exposed to violence as a child in your own upbringing family. There can be other significant traumas, and we need to add trauma techniques into our methodology in combating the violent behavior. We also have been working on making cultural sensitive approaches, because we face clients with different backgrounds and also different cultural backgrounds. We have developed a specific methodology in order to meet adolescents, youths who has been developing violence and aggressional problems. In our sample of 600 youths, 90% of them has been experienced violence in their upbringing families. And of course, parenting and fatherhood has also become an important part of the treatment. We state that we need to work specifically and systematically with the fact that most of our clients are also fathers at the same time as they are abusers. As Christian, a very small example, short example, when we came into the focusing on parenting after 6 months, Christian said, I have not been able to at the same time think about myself as a father and a violent husband. And that division is also valid for us as counselors and therapists. I think it is existentially quite difficult to see that I am a carer and a harmer at the same time. In addition to specialized services for battered women and specialized services for children living with violence at home, we have also been developing programs and methodologies around the coexistence of domestic violence and substance abuse, alcohol abuse, being actual problems for the very same client. And our absolutely latest development work is to test out the treatment work and the methodology we have been developed in a high security prison setting. A very brief comments on conclusions. I think by 2014 it's fairly fair to say that domestic violence really constitutes a complex, multidimensional problem. This is not an easy piece of problem. It's not easy to heal it. There's a need for the further development of practical tools and methodologies, and there's a need for further research on what works for whom. There is a need for an increased capacity building in all relevant professions, and there's a need for a better coordinated response locally. When it comes to prevention, maybe we can take some thoughts on that during the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Is there any,
I'd like to ask a little bit about how you see the changes in Norwegian society since you began in the 80s. Like, women's status has really changed. And a lot of Norwegian men feel that, there are a lot more women in the workplace and all of that. So how has that kind of affected this? And secondly, there are a lot of Pakistanis, so I'm guessing you might have had some Pakistani origin Norwegians, like your clients. So do you see any differences in terms of culture?
Briefly, the first question.
repeat the first.
Oh, like, the changes in the status of the
Right, thanks. Then I'm track. Commenting on the first one, as you mentioned, Norway is said to be one of the countries that has been developing quite a lot concerning gender equality, and But now we have prevalence studies, the first one in 2005 and the second one in 2014. And of course we need more than one study to see if things are declining or decreasing or increasing. So the disturbing facts coming out of the last 2004 national prevalence study is that the violence is not reduced, although we seem to be so extremely gender equal. That is really a contrasting and disturbing thought. About culture, cultural background, what we have been doing altogether 2-3 projects on how do we have to adjust our methodology to make it fit different cultural traditional backgrounds. And it has been an extremely exciting work, because half of the challenge was to change my mind, not his mind. For being aware that I was representing the majority, my way of thinking was taken for granted. I didn't have to question it. The idea that he was loaded with culture and I was not was, of course, straight down the drain. So we have designed and adjusted our methodology, not changing the aim of the work, but changing the pathways, recognizing the significance of a big family structure, recognizing what makes sense and what is meaningful, and go through that in challenging the violence.
We'll take her first and then you.
Yeah, my question is related to the relative high percentage of men who have experienced violence during their own childhood, which was 60% you were mentioning. My question is, do you also have more details of information about the men who have experienced violence but not getting involved in violent relationships? And if so, what are the elements maybe useful for preventing violence?
Very interesting.
It's a very interesting and important and very difficult question. I'm very clear that the fact that 60% has been exposed to violence as a child is not the single directly mechanical reason explaining why they use violence. It's an extremely important component in trying to understand the violence, not explaining it, because it's 1,000 different factors constituting the problem of violence down the road. There is, I think, the exposure to violence is a hyper explanation of, or illustration of, is what happens when you disturb the attachment processes of children. I think that is a fruitful way to look into why, in addition to specific traumas, a lot more than 60% of my guys are traumatized in one way or the other. And trauma connected to neglect, disruption of the natural attachment processes, because it's through attachment you learn empathy. Empathy is not something that you are born with. The capacity to empathy you're born with, but you need to not primarily learn it, you need to experience it. And when you are in a neglectful, emotionally neglectful upbringing, then you have the highest risk for disrupting these processes. And without an integrated capacity of empathy, then you don't have the barriers stopping you from going over the passing the line, if you know what I mean. This is difficult to answer shortly, but attachment is extremely interesting to look into.
Okay, we have lots of people raising hands, so I'm going to take two right now, and we will take the rest later. We'll have her and then her.
I just have two questions. One is that the perpetrators who come for this counseling, how are they referred, or court referral, or how do they get there? Is it self-referral? And what is the impact? I mean, in terms of, you said 23% after the first 3 sessions are usually dropping out. But what about the rest? What do you see in terms of change in their behavior, or, you know, how long do you keep in touch with them? Is there any data that is showing that this is helpful? I mean, what is the result that you got?
That was 3 questions.
Sorry.
How they get to us, we are a low threshold service, although we are highly specialized, the one of us working there. It's an open door policy in the sense that about 45% are coming themselves, very often with the pressure from their family or their partners, of course, but formally coming by themselves. 53% are referred by anyone in their professional capacity being in contact with one of the family members of the family, and 2% are court mandated. It's a very different tradition from the American context, for example. The clients that are going through the whole process, I think we have to add a few more percentages to the dropout, because not everybody stays after the third session. But still, the first external research evaluation in '96 showed extremely good results, and now we have a little bit more detailed results, but still the results are extremely positive, either in terms of the violence stopping at all totally, or being significantly reduced. We do both individual counseling and group counseling. The average length for individual counseling is 10 months, and the average for group stay is almost 2 years.
Yes, please. Last. And then we'll come back after the next speaker.
Yeah. If the model translated to lay persons, like to do the counseling by lay people, not really professionals, and if you take this model to other countries where we don't find psychologists or social workers, can this be translated to being done by other lay people if they are trained in short?
The general answer is yes. My most significant experience is connected to our cooperation with a big women's organization in South Africa that together with us developed a men's program as an extension of their activity. And of course you have to, I have been extremely conscious about that. Our way of working is valid to our local context, and you have to do it with another design. So what we did in this project was that we made more of a collective perspective. Me, together with 2 trained people locally, went out to the villages and gathered all the men of the village. And we started about talking about their lives and their struggles, and what kind of men they want to be, and what kind of fathers they wanted to be, what parts of their tradition they had been experiencing harmful themselves that they wanted to leave behind, what part of their traditions would they love to pass on to their children. And out of that you find a smaller proportion of really traumatized men that was able to have a follow-up with the local people I was working together with.
Okay, we have had 2 very deep and insightful sessions. Somebody here had asked about the process of therapy. I think the process of therapy is unfolding while we're having a dialogue and discourse around that, whether it is something to do with the neglect at an emotional level at the childhood, where apathy is the biggest killer that we see nowadays, or the social constructs that we have seen, whether it is parenting, whether it is abuse, violence, and migration that we see very often, and to the internal factors. And next session is very interesting. That's the reason I'm bringing in these factors, whether it is ADHD, what we diagnose, or whether it is anger management we talk about, whether we talk about drug use. There are internal factors and genetic factors which are linked. So maybe we will have more therapy-based approaches which will come through the next session. We have a very interesting topic which is next topic presented by Baron Oron. Am I right in pronouncing him? Yeah. Okay, he is a development trainer with network of stepping stone approaches Uganda, and has background in drama for development and has over 20 years of experience in training both nationally and internationally.
Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. The Stepping Stones program is a training package on HIV, gender, and communication and relationship skills. It was developed first in Uganda in 1994 by Alice Wellborn, an international specialist on gender and participatory approaches to development, who had recently been diagnosed with HIV. The late scholar, Professor Rose Mboa, who was head of the Department of Music, Dance and Drama, from where Jemina Sebufu and I had recently graduated, was our lead trainer. I was involved in the first Stepping Stones workshop facilitators team in 1994 as a young men's peer group facilitator, and Jemin was a young women's facilitator. The program has since gone global to over 100 countries. It has been adapted in at least 30 languages, and it has reduced intimate partner violence in an RCT conducted by the South African Medical Council, and it has also reduced intimate partner violence in countries like Gambia, Malawi, and India, where it has also reduced child marriage. The program was designed from the outset to run with the 4 different peer groups simultaneously, based on age and gender. And each with a facilitator of their own gender and similar age. With about 18 sessions over about 9 weeks, a few sessions also bring the participants all together to share and compare their feelings. Thus, they build bridges of understanding, empathy, and compassion support between the 4 peer groups. All the program is based on discussions, role plays, games, and drawing, with no literacy needed. This ensures that anyone can take part, irrespective of their formal education. The idea of working together with 4 peer groups simultaneously is one of the most fundamental stones of the Stepping Stones program to forge cross-gender and cross-generational understanding. The Karamojong pastoral community in northeastern Uganda, along with many other similar communities across northern Uganda, southern Sudan, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia, have been beset by long-term small arms proliferation, much of it in the end product of decades of extractive colonial Cold War strategies across the region. This small arms proliferation has resulted in immense instabilities, much attendant violence, including sexual violence, associated with replacing traditional spears for stock theft, associated with occasional injuries and death, with mass injuries and killings through machine gun fire. With elders' traditional authorities structure, disciplinary sanctions and powers often undermined and eroded by colonial administrations and internationally supported post-colonial dictatorship, young men's adventure in raiding have morphed into undisciplined massacres associated with increasing levels of sexual violence. So with support from the World Bank Logica project and the invaluable input from the Fencing Center of Tufts University, we adapted the original program and conducted it in 10 parishes over 9 months in Karamoja in 2013. Tufts University conducted baseline quality interviews with 95 people of different genders and ages. and 1,556 quantitative interviews with young men, 7 intervention and 3 control sites. The quantitative survey had a stepped wage design in 4 different stages. You can learn more about the report later. Since Stepping Stones was first created, we have always sought to support participants to work together to view the bigger picture, to understand the issues and challenges facing each separate section of their community, to step out of the box and to view the world differently through stepping stones into one another's sandals and perspectives. We have always worked from the principle that we all carry the power of good within us, from cradle to grave, and that although we might lose sight of it at times, owing to ways in which we have been treated by others and our defensive responses to this, we can always find that good within us with the care and support of those around us. We have often been asked what our theoretical framework was, and we have always found that a hard question to answer. However, with the new evidence on interpersonal neurobiology, we can now clearly answer that. Here we explain briefly Dan Siegel's triangle of mental health, which we see connects very strongly with our program. Siegel's triangle consists of 3 equal prime points. The brain, which is connected through our spinal column to the workings and energy of all essential organs of our body, including our heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys. The mind process that regulates our information flow in us, and relationships, which is how our information and energy is shared between us and others. Siegel then identifies 9 key components that make up all of us, and which need to be integrated in this triangle framework for us to achieve good health and well-being. All 9 of them relate to all the parts of the triangle we have just seen, but for purposes of explanation, we have grouped them in 3 around the triangle. Let's look at our minds. The 3 components that Siegel identifies, which are perhaps most connected to our minds, are insight, and understanding why we behave the way we do, and emotional balance. For each of these 3 components, we have various different exercises throughout the program which support these qualities to develop in the participants. We show some examples of relevant exercises in the right-hand column here. Now let's move to the next 3 components. These relate more to our brains, which are connected to all our essential organs in our bodies and are shown in this chart with more related exercises. They are regulating our bodies, learning and using an ability to pause before we act, intuition, bring the wisdom of the body into our awareness. Siegel's last 3 components of mental health well-being are also shown in this chart here. To feel with the attunement, to feel with another person, empathy or ability to make maps in your mind of someone else's experience, and morality for the greater good of society. As well as that great framework from Siegel, new research has also shown us the power of positive thinking instead of problem-oriented exercises. So now we look at 2 of the exercises we highlighted earlier in red. Created by psychiatrist Elspeth McAdam, ability spotting gives us the powers of ability to awaken participants' awareness of the strengths and skills they have with them, built from their own experiences and abilities to overcome past challenges and fears. Participants work in small groups so that each shares with the others in turn a story of something that he or she felt had challenged them in the past, which they felt they had managed to overcome no matter how small. The participant describes briefly what the challenge was and how he or she managed to overcome it. The other participants listening to this story praise him or her as the story is retold, for courage, imagination, kindness, persistence, etc. As the others identify these qualities, they either write down or draw them on pieces of paper, which they stick all over the storyteller. At the end of the story, The storyteller then gathers all the papers together and ties them into a piece of thread or ribbon, which he or she then ties as a necklace around his or her neck. Then it is the turn of the other participant to do the same. This apparently simple, some may even say simplistic process, has immense powers. The very act of telling someone a story of something difficult in one's past, often for the first time, and having it met with support and encouragement and praise, can often be the first step to readjusting and overcoming past memories of fears and loss into foundation stones of strength and resilience. Another lesson in positive solution-focused thinking from Macadam has been an exercise on dreaming our futures and backlighting. This helps us develop our ability to connect the deep intuition of our profound creativity and good which is held in all our bodies. In this, participants are invited to work in pairs or threes. Each in turn is invited by the other to dream of something successful that they are doing in 5 years' time, which they feel proud of then. Through intensive questioning from their peers, using who, what, how, where, when questions, the participant is invited to fill in the story, working backwards through time to the present in order to dream how he or she has achieved this personal dream. Participants are invited to understand that dreaming and imagining are creative processes that come from beyond our regular thinking minds. We are not talking about thinking and planning our futures, but rather making use of the right side of our brains and letting our deeper wisdom and values emerge as a dream, a hope, or an imagined future. In summary, through constant and repeated use of all these exercises and many more, we use acting, listening to each other, watching and talking, enabling participants to make use of their mind, brain, and relationship building faculties and skills to learn new ways of feeling, thinking, doing, being, and connecting in the world. We also to endeavor to make sure that all exercises finish with a positive feeling, thought, and action, since we have again learned from new research that what's done most recently that impressed himself on us. Here's a quote from the ladies in Karamoja after a certain phase of the intervention. We also have strongly reported improvements in interpersonal relations. Whilst at the start, 43% of respondents thought it was okay to hit a woman, at the end 23 thought it was okay. Meanwhile, in the non-intervention sites, 43 still thought it was okay. So this was a big change directly related to the program. There are also positive results to share, which include a better sense of security, better behavior management, especially in relation to alcohol, increased task sharing in households, and greater respect for authority. To summarize the lessons learned, the Siegel framework, based on new research in interpersonal neurobiology, has helped us to validate our work of 20 years. The new exercises such as ability spotting and several others, which are positive and solution focused, are very powerful and popular. Change does not happen overnight, and sometimes attitudes change after behavior changes. It's not a linear process and takes a long time. Community ownership is always important in these programs. This was a pilot program of 1 year, so more research is needed, and more research needs more funds. More support is needed for all the young men who are most marginalized and have less to lose through violence. We also recommend that authorities ensure primary schooling completion for all youth to increase non-violent options for raising income. And finally, TAFs recommends that a program such as this has great potential and that we need a long-term research program with a livelihood component over a wider geographical area. Thank you very much.
questions were specific to him, and then we'll open the house for further discourse. Yes, please.
My question, Baron, thank you very much for the presentation, is that this has been a reworking of Stepping Stone,
Yes.
which has led it to become somewhat longer and more complex. But the biggest problem with the previous version of Stepping Stone, in terms of scaling it up, has been its length. So I want to really challenge you to tell us, why is this an improvement on the previous version? Because the previous version also reduced gender-based violence and brought about all of the changes that you've mentioned here. So why is this new version better, given that I think you have created a bigger obstacle to roll out by making it longer?
Yeah, thank you. From the discussions and the research that have been conducted, we realize that when we always talk about the negative elements, either through the acting or through the discussions, it reinforces that perception. So that's why we are now trying to look more at the positive angle. Of course, I agree with you, but I think that's something that we need before the publication comes out. We need to keep considering, keep talking about. So I agree with you. Yes, thank you.
We will take a... Yes,
Actually, I have a question too.
okay, so we'll come back to that. Anything specific to Baron, please? Yes.
I would like to know how you get to ensure that the participants actually stay through all the stages of that program, and then measuring the impact, like the new behavior plan. How do you sustain that? How do you measure that kind of impact?
Would you be a bit louder, please, or stand up, because it's difficult to...
Okay, thank you. I would like to know how you ensure that the participants stay through all the stages of the program, and then measuring the impact of the new behavior plans, like how do you sustain the new behavior plan after the end of the program?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this Stepping Stones by its nature is an interesting manual, and people talk about things they feel affect them most. They use role plays, they use group discussions, the local language, and it involves everybody. So this alone encourages people to come because they feel it's something they enjoy. So in terms of evaluation, there's like the previous one we did for Karamoja that was conducted by TAPS. There were questionnaires before the intervention and after the intervention. In terms of continuity, of course, when the program ends, there are peer educators who are there who are not paid, but they are just friends of the community who keep talking to them. That's the only thing we can do in that sense of fun. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, just simple but important. I'm very excited about the presentation because I come from the same country, and sooner than later we shall be working in that community. My concern though is, you kind of say issues are generated and then they form a kind of ring. But I was just wondering, with the literacy levels in this community, how do you go about that? Because 3 weeks ago when I was in that community, that was a big concern, that when you come here, you should be prepared to work with a community that is completely zero literate. So how do you go about that?
Yeah. We work with the people who speak the local language. We get the facilitators and trainers who come from the same place and are able to speak the same language and do the exercises and the discussions the way the community wants. We don't impose any style or any messages to the community, but the community is able to generate the messages they want themselves with the guidance of the facilitator and the manual that we have.
In one of your last slides, you mentioned that there was a measurable change in people's perception regarding gender violence. You didn't talk about actual behavior change. Can you tell us a little bit about whether behavior change was measured whether that behavior could be sustained over a period of time. Has that kind of measurement been, has that taken place?
Thank you. I think why we talked about behavior, the perception, is because this was simply a one-year pilot project. But we hope that if it's more than 1 year, then there should be a window of opportunity for behavior change.
Yes, and this will be the last question to him, then the house is open for general discussion. Yeah, please go ahead. Is it specific to balance?
No.
To everybody? Okay, so the house is now open for discussion. One, yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think it was about the participants involved in the process within the community and how the approach ensures that you reach more marginalised members of the communities that you work in. For example, people with disabilities or others who face complex forms of violence and different kinds of gender-based violence, and how that comes then into the process of stepping through and how you deal with different hierarchies, both within a group of young males, for example. There's many different hierarchies within the carriage on that come into play in the statutory process, and how stepping stones as an effect enables that to be engaged.
Thank you for that. Yes, there are people who work with the disabled. If you take the example of those ones, the people with disabilities, and if we can decide to directly target working with the people with disabilities. But for this particular case, we're expecting people to come from their villages to the training grounds, either to some preschools, and it was difficult to get those ones who wouldn't walk to come up to that place. But stepping stones are flexible, and when there's a need, we can always go to where people who are disabled are. But this particular case, we didn't have them coming for the sessions. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. Peter Carlek from Bangkok University, Macquarie University. I have two questions. First one to both Marius and Roland. If any of your program works with male clients, perpetrators of domestic violence against same-sex partners? And the second question is specifically for Marius. If the ATV studies look at any relationship between violence experience in a school setting, educational settings, or alternative care settings in childhood, and then patterns or types of patterns in violence in adulthood.
Regarding the second question, no. Of course, it's a bit roughly described. When what we do as a part of the third step or the third theme is actually to really explore all the different life experiences that is connected to violence in some way, one way or the other. Sometimes it's bullying in school that has been important, but it's not a prerequisite in the sense that we are deciding in advance that this is going to be explored systematically.
Yes.
And the first question?
The first question was about working male is male or victim is also male. That one is the question, yeah. Yeah, we also do that. It's, at the end, I think, behind it's the same behavior, the same topics. And, but, yeah, I think so. If you go deeply in the contact with these perpetrators, at the end you come to the same result. What the problem they have, the behavior they have in this situation, doesn't matter if it is a man or a woman on the other side. He has a problem that he likes to bring his emotion and all this problem that is inside away with this fighting. And I also work with this man who fights against men, especially with young men, but also with adults. I really think at the end it's the same thing. But to go with them deeply in their own story, their own sort of behavior, that need slowly they then go to the facts. But
our experience is a bit different. We have really tried to target clients with who use violence in same-sex relationships. It has been an extremely important issue for the government. We got money from the government to specialize, and our basic experience is, although we were actively recruiting, going out into the community, it was extremely difficult to get perpetrators of violence in same-sex relationships to actually accept coming into our project and our services.
Whereas, if I may just add, our experience has been also different, but we find that there is a lot of internalization of violence. And the focus on the relationship is so high that the focus on employability and livelihood is marginalized, and the focus is so much into the partner behavior and internalizing his or her pain, and talking about it takes over the whole self process. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. My question is, when we are working with the perpetrators, beside the issue of dropout, another important issue is the relapse.
Yes.
Why this is I asking about this, because it often makes counselors demotivated, and we struggle a lot to work again with the perpetrators. And another question is, do you have like a program for caregivers, I mean for the counselors, to deal with this kind of issue? Thank you.
I think it's a good question, because it's that much difficult with this work. Yeah? You work in a field that with the dropout rate is maybe high. You never know that. And to make this work, you always have to go through the situation that people don't like to follow in your counseling session. Sometimes it's the problem of the counselor, sometimes it's the problem of the client. They don't really like to change something. But this is difficult. When I work when I teach a future counselor in Albania, for example, it was also the question how we can manage that somebody don't want to be in this counseling session anymore. If you drop out, is it my mistake or is it a mistake of the client? This is always a big question, and I think that's a part of this work. We never can reach everybody of them, because if you have that, then we have a solution to go through an easy way. But that's a part of this work to live with this fact that people drop out. Never good if somebody drop out, but this is part of the work. Yeah. And my thing is to. I think it's important to talk with the council about exactly this one. They also have feeling in their own work. They also have a behavior then, and what they can learn, what they can do better maybe, how they manage their own feelings, their own emotions in their own work. This is important fact, I think. Yeah. And we should talk also about that, not only about the clients, but also about the council who's doing this specific work. Yeah.
Okay, we will take 4 hands, maximum 5 hands. We have one here, one here, one there, and one there. I'm randomly gone about this, but maybe I missed one from that side because I missed that completely. So we will take it from here, and then.
I think in India we did not have any course or curriculum how to work with the perpetrators. When we are working with when we start working with perpetrators, then we start getting exposure on how to work with them. Then we talk to our supervisors and all. So I think I want to know whether there are standardized curriculum or training modules that you have developed, or it is part of your curriculum while you are training your psychologists or social workers when they are studying.
Basically, the answer is yes. We have been writing books about this way of doing treatment, which is both outlining the theoretical basis for our model and also is instructive in how to deal with these 4 themes in different ways. It's not a manual. It's not lesson based, but it's very descriptive.
Next, here.
This is a question for Marius. You said that you work in parallel with the children and parents.
Right.
And I know there are other models people use where they work with the children and parents together. I wondered if you could talk a bit about why you see it an advantage to work in parallel.
The basis, the starting point for that is that digging into trying to develop services for children, it becomes quickly apparent that you need to provide services for the children themselves, that you need to have parallel work with their parents. You can't do the children's work in isolation. And one example is that we have been running groups, parallel groups for the parents when we have their children in a group setting. And that group for the adults is not about their issues. It's specifically about being the parents to this child going in the other group. Because you need, parents are responsible down in the end, and if you are going to get somewhere with the children, they need a space for themselves, but they also need parents that are more attentive than they used to be, referring with reference to the violence.
Yes, I'd ask you. Yes.
Do you have the experience working with the former prisoners or silence, because they are also perpetrated also the big silence, because the problem
it's difficult to hear.
Prisoners, working with the prisoners.
Right.
Or former prisoners,
Former prisoners.
especially when they have to integrate with the family and with the social and the environment. Yeah, and the second question, especially in the Scandinavian countries, you have studied what the effect of the silence against women, especially. Do you also have more study on the perpetrator side and the effect of if the country, for example, sending the perpetrators? Because when
It's difficult to hear with a fan on. I'm sorry.
You could be a bit louder and I'll try to.
The second question, do you have study costs on how the impact of, for example, one country if they don't handle the perpetrators? Because some of the campaign on domestic violence using study costs to prevent for the violence against women or sexual violence. Because in the Scandinavian countries they have a very good study cost on that. That this is really stimulating the country to prevent violence from the aspect of economic and study costs.
Concerning the second question, we also do study courses on that, but very rarely only on that. It depends on who I'm training and who are attending the course. When there's a lot of decision makers and politicians in the public, then we are highlighting the cost of not doing anything because we have such good data on the cost of violence.
Yes.
One moment. The former prisoners?
Former prisoners? Any work on former prisoners?
Yeah, I did that also work in prison, but I think when I look back, working in prison is important work. And always when you work in prison, you have big hope that a lot of things change if people go out of prison. And I think this work, especially working prisoners, perpetrators, is then effective if you have follow-up sessions. If they're out of the prison and you go on in the relationship with this man, then it could be maybe effective work. Without that, I'm a bit disturbed. But I think it's important work working in prison.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I had a background working with perpetrators through the court system, and my experience is that those who come with sexual violent behavior is totally different than the other. So my question is that how would you screening them? Are you separately treated them separately? Because what I experienced is that those who have a violent, sexually violent activity totally different from the others. They are the ones who behave very well. And even in the prison, they are the ones who, good behavior in the prison. So how to go about in treatment? And are you separate them and treat them differently, or go about taking them one?
In the Norwegian context, we don't have very substantial experience on this important issue that you are raising. We have been involved in psychoeducational programs while they're in the prison. Now we have the latest project on serving therapy inside the prison. But talking about what happens when they get out, usually we see that if we start treatment in the prison, the dropout is high when they come out. When the treatment starts as a prerequisite for an early release and starts after they come out of prison, then the dropout is lower.
We will take him and then the lady at the last side.
One of the things that all three of you mentioned was storytelling in different ways. So stories of not just the men but the children. And one of the things that I wondered from our work in Australia, in the SHED project, the men's stories could often, and this is around domestic violence or men's violence against women in the home, the men's story was very often very different to the woman's story. So my question is, do you interrogate the man's story from the woman's perspective? And if you do, how do you use that in group work? Because in the group work, in our experience, there's much resistance, as you said, but there's also denial, excusing, blaming, minimizing. So how much is the partner story or a victim story, if you like, whether it's the child coming into the picture? And the other thing I just wanted to say was the SHED project was part of PhD research, and a manual for that is available online. If anyone's interested, happy to give it. It's online for a group in Mombasa in Kenya, where it's been replicated in a prison context. So,
in our setting, increasingly connected to the huge evaluation study I was referring to, but also as a part of our standard clinical work, is that at intake, standard procedure is to talk to the partner. Midway, we talk to the partner, and in the end, we talk to the partner. And as part of this longitudinal study, we also talk to the men and their partners 18 months after. And I was referring to that study. The results from this current study is very much preliminary yet, because all the data is not there. And I think the most one important reason for that the study is not showing the same data in 1996 is that throughout the research period we grew by 70%, hiring new people, establishing new places and different, but still it will be extremely interesting to see the final data. No, it's a full-blown psychotherapy research evaluation study on our work in Norway.
Last question. There was this lady.
I will take that.
Okay, you. Okay.
I just want to share, it's a lovely thing to be here, and what I want to share is about, we have a project working in Karnataka. I'm from Karnataka Promotion Trust. We work with women sex workers and their intimate partners. And interestingly, these intimate partners are actually very loving initially, and then they kind of turn violent because of being very insecure that she's having sex with many other men. And interestingly, what we have also done is we have also kind of taken a stepping stones module, put in some of our the relationship, loving relationships and things like that, and counseling. We have integrated both of it. And what we we have seen in the 2 years is the relationship between the partner, the sex worker and the intimate partner. The violence has come down drastically, and there has been very good relationships to the extent that the man even negotiates condoms with his lover so that he doesn't get infected with HIV and vice versa, which was actually a huge problem because negotiating condoms with the intimate partner for the sex workers was an issue. So I share this, and counseling, yes, our friend there just said there is a module to address perpetrators, which NIMHANS in Bangalore, there is National Health and Mental Institute has developed a module. That is a fabulous module which has absolutely no presentation, but is all activity based. So it actually looks at the violence from the childhood. So it maps from there. So it's really helpful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your suggestions. We've had a very interesting journey here. I think it has been transformative to me at least. And starting from Roland's individual deep journey of fears and instincts, where we talked about gender transformative approaches to behavioral changes and reflecting of violence to reflecting gender, where we talked about vulnerability, we talked about culture of silence, we talked about accepting emotions, and a very important aspect that you brought about was the role of a therapist, and that one-up position that we always feel that we have over the client, and how do we deal with that internally ourselves. And the self-reflection in a cultural context is very, very important. While Maurice talked about culture, tradition, and psychology and the 4 aspects of the violence, while he continued to do that, the 20 years of experience helped us answer some of the funders' questions that we always struggle with: numbers, evaluations, and outcomes and behavioral changes. So we have some diagnostic criteria. We have dropout rates here. We have 3 sessions, it's mandatory sessions to see any kind of change. And we talked about capacity building and building task force as an important area in mental health, because there are very few of trained mental health professionals that exist in involvement of local community and pathways to care, if you can bring in that. And I think what deeply brought me the process of attachment and the trust that a child needs to develop, and how it impacts the violence and the neglect that the childhood, if we can work in that area more, probably would give us many more answers to work with the perpetrators. Barron talked about triangle of mental health. We have all gone through that whole neuropsychological aspects of right brain, and the necklace that he weaved was so beautifully done of the body, mind, and the relationship. We've talked about it in different language, but to see the necklace itself made a lot of change, and the whole positive feeling, the feeling of being resilient, the feeling of taking charge of one's life was very, very beautifully brought up in the whole context. And some of the questions that were asked were very, very challenging, and somebody talked about stress and burnout of the counselor. Somebody talked about the other side. I mean, people who are going through violence are also adjusting well, so do we have studies to look at that? We talked about business, we talked about many groups like MSM and other things. Thank you so much for being here with us. It was a wonderful session. A huge applause to everyone.